What's up, peeps? Okay, so today we're gonna be talking about relationships while I do my base makeup. I also wanted to thank those of you who did submit to my Google form in the last makeup therapy video. I got a lot, so we're gonna be going through, I'm gonna go through 2 today. I'm gonna save that for the end. And I'm probably gonna be going through those submissions because there were like enough of them and they were pretty substantial, like throughout these videos, I mean. Really quickly before we get into it, if you haven't turned on notifications for like when my videos go up, please do it. It's so annoying that YouTube makes you like subscribe and you have to like and you have to comment and you have to turn on this notification, you have to turn on that notification. Everything has to be on for you to even see the stuff that you like subscribed to. It seems like it should be that easy. It's not, unfortunately. Anyway, that would just be very useful. Thanks. That's it. So we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna be doing my base. I'm gonna zoom you in so we can do this. As always, in these kinds of videos, as always, I've put out 1 so far. Everything will be linked down below. I'm not gonna necessarily be talking through each product while I'm doing it. Freshly bleached, love, so good. Nothing like a fresh bleach, I have to say. Like, truly nothing like it. Okay, so I wanna talk about relationships mostly because there are 2 things that were 2, I guess, advice paragraphs that were submitted to my Google form that have to do with relationships in different ways. And it's also something that I feel like, I don't know, I mean, obviously we all have relationships in one way or another, whether it's family or romantic or friends or whatever it is. And they can be difficult to navigate, like really difficult to navigate. This is such a lame, this isn't pilling, is it? I'm using a new moisturizer today. This is such a lame analogy, but I feel like it's a really good visual representation of a healthy relationship, of a relationship that will work. Okay, yeah, I'm super paranoid that my moisturizer is gonna pill. So I'm like, is my primer pilling on top of it? So far, so good, bro. All right, anyway, I'll keep you updated on that stuff in other videos. So the analogy would be the color wheel. Hear me out. I think a healthy relationship, 2 people, generally, we're just gonna use that as the example right now. It's like complementary colors on the color wheel. So for instance, one of the reasons that we use color correcting in makeup is like, if you have redness on the face, you'll use a, like a green tinted primer to neutralize that redness so that it's not coming through your foundation or something, right? So green and red mixed, neutralize. When they're put next to each other, they make each other stand out even more. This happened when I've dyed my hair. When I went like peach, it brought out more of like the kind of blue greens in my skin. When I dyed my hair more of like a turquoise color, it brought out a lot more peachy, like pink tones in my skin. So the reason that I'm using this analogy is I feel like a healthy relationship, one that works, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a family member, whether it's romantic, the things about these 2 people that are different need to complement each other, and the things that are the same need to complement each other. They all need to work together. A really good example of this is if you have someone in the relationship who feels pressure under like high stress situations, someone who isn't able to function in those kinds of situations, and you have someone in the relationship who thrives in that kind of a situation. Someone who is able to like handle that pressure so that when something with person A is going wrong and they are shutting down because they can't handle it, person B is able to step in and take over the situation and help person A. So that's like a really good example of a relationship between 2 people, and one aspect of that relationship that works is this person isn't as strong in this area, but this person is stronger. So they balance each other out. I think this can look so many different ways as well. I don't think it's necessarily as clear to us what we need, like, or what is going to balance those things about us, if that makes sense. I know for me personally, I didn't really understand things that would about myself that needed those balances. Where's my Lisa Eldridge foundation? Oh, and obviously that's where dating comes in because you don't necessarily like know exactly what that's going to look like, right? Now, where you run into trouble is when those things that are different, this is the extreme example, I think, or case, but when the things that are different clash and the things that are the same clash. So for instance, if you have two people in a relationship who neither one of them can make up their mind, neither one of them are decisive, and they're both indecisive in situations, that can cause a lot of friction, and that can cause a lot of fights, because both people are probably like getting frustrated with the other person and themselves at the same time. So those are two things that are the same, that clash, that don't work. And then you might have things that are different that clash, that don't complement each other, that just end up causing more friction. I think I'm having a hard time thinking of an example because there are always caveats. Like sometimes the things that are different that clash, or the things that are the same that clash, are kind of like, it's called cost analysis, or like cost benefit analysis, or whatever the fuck that is. It's like, obviously not everything that's the same or different about two people are going to work perfectly, right? Like we all know that there's no such thing as a completely perfect relationship. There's always going to be things that don't necessarily work, or things that like drive you crazy about somebody, or vice versa. But I think trying to find those, like the majority of the most important things that complement each other is the most important thing in a relationship. In a relationship that's going to last, that's going to work. It's about finding the balances in those things. What the fuck is going on with my forehead? Like I have a feeling that if you think about any of the most successful relationships that you've had, again, whether it's like some of your closest, your favorite relationships, whether it is like romantic, or if it's a friendship, or if it's a family member that you're close with, if you think about them, you could probably come up with some things that like they balance about you. Maybe it's the fact that like you're a little bit more shy, and you have a cousin or something, and they're like your best friend, and it's because they're much more outgoing. And so the two of you together just kind of become like a stronger team. I think whenever I think about like relationships in my life that have been the most successful, it is typically that kind of thing where I'm finding balance in areas where I'm just not as strong, or as confident, I guess. Obviously it becomes like a lot harder when it's a family member, because like you don't choose your family, you just like are born and you have them. Navigating those relationships can be like a little bit more difficult, I think, especially if you have like personality traits or habits or whatever. When you have differences that clash and similarities that clash, it just becomes like much more difficult. And then I think that's where like the importance of communication becomes so much more important. Like we all know communication in general is really important, but if you have that kind of a relationship and you don't have communication, then I think it's like impossible. It's impossible to navigate. And even if you have a relationship where you have all those really nice balances, there's still going to be, you know, misunderstandings or miscommunications, because you're not the exact same person. So you're not seeing things through the exact same lens. So if you don't have that communication, there's still going to be like misinterpretations, and shit's gonna get like messy. One of the funny things about like talking about this or thinking about this, I think, is that you really don't have any idea what those balances need to be until you meet them. You know what I mean? Like there were certain things about myself that I thought I needed to balance other things, or to like complete a relationship and make it successful, but they just were not as important as I thought they were. And I didn't recognize that until I was in a relationship that actually like worked. And it didn't necessarily have those things that I thought were like super important that actually weren't. Like they just weren't that important. That's actually a really good exercise. I would be super interested to hear like if this is something that you've thought about, or if this is something that like, if you sit down and think about it, like what are things that your most successful relationships, again, encompassing all kinds of relationships, have in common? That's like very interesting. I would say that mine, in terms of like friendship and also romantic and all of those, would be someone who is so rude that my batteries do that. Someone who is like pretty comfortable with themselves and also in social settings, and like a little bit more outgoing, because I'm not super like outgoing. And I tend to be a little bit more like like retreat and not as like wanting to put myself out there or talk myself up kind of way, you know? I mostly want to hear what you guys have to say about this. I'm mostly just like interested if this is something that you've thought about. Relationships are such a strange thing. Now I'm thinking, well, I think like mostly friends and, no, it's all of them. Mostly, but friends and like romantic. It does take a very long time to figure out, like it takes a lot of like experience and introspection to figure out what those balances are, those things that like you know will be successful in a friendship, in a romantic relationship. And it's after those kinds of experiences and finding like those healthy relationships, I think, the ones that work, that are balanced, that you're able to probably apply them to like family relationships, like the permanent ones, the ones that you don't have as much control over, or that you don't, you know, choose. I mean, it obviously depends, but like it's not like you're really walking away unless, you know, it's a horrible relationship and you are walking away. But it takes those other experiences to be able to like figure out how to communicate and also implement what you've learned, you know? This portion of the video is definitely not advice. I'm not like giving you advice on how to like find the perfect relationship, because again, I think the most important thing to remember is that like you have zero idea of what those really important things look like until you actually see them in practice. It takes all of that, like, it just takes that experience to figure out what works and what doesn't. I think I'm mostly interested in this topic and talking about it because I feel like people, I mean, with dating, it's just like, dating is like a very difficult thing, right? And it's something that everybody does, probably at some point. And I think people are kind of always like reading into situations and trying to like trying to look for some kind of a formula, I guess, as to what is going to like make the perfect match, especially now that we have things like dating apps where you put your interests or just like a little bit about yourself. And it's like, on the one hand, it's good because you can like weed out certain things, because there are going to be like certain people that you're just not like straight up not going to mesh with, right? But I think it's just like, it's not conducive to all of those like the nuances of like relationships and meeting people and figuring out like what actually works in actual practice, you know? I tried a new moisturizer and primer combo and I'm really not happy with the way it's making my base look, but I don't know, whatever. I'm definitely interested in hearing if you guys think I'm like way off with this, or what your thoughts are, or if this is something that you've even like considered. Especially if you are someone who's been like online dating. Do we call it online dating? Using dating apps? I don't know what the like best way to phrase it is. Online dating kind of makes it feel like it's OkCupid or something. I guess I'm talking more dating apps, which are, I mean, I would assume that everybody nowadays uses them, like of dating age, or the majority of people at least. The problem with bleached hair is the bronzer. Ziva, that is very, very annoying. I'm going to read a couple of the submissions so that we can talk about them while I'm finishing up. Okay, so the first one is, I have a family member a few years older than me that has made judgy comments about my appearance since I was a kid. They were usually unsolicited and made me feel incredibly insecure growing up. I assumed she was in the right simply because she was older. While the comments have gotten better with time, I'm resentful. I recognize that she behaves like this because of her own trauma, but now I recognize how much it has affected me. She can be defensive and sensitive when I bring up these issues I have in our relationship. She loves to dish it but can't take it, which only adds to my resentment after the years of taking it from her. How do I approach this without losing my cool and being respectful of her feelings as well as my own? This is definitely a tough thing to navigate, especially because you feel like you have like gotten to this place where you have enough introspection and you've spent all this time piecing together, like, why do I feel a certain way and where does it come from? And you've figured out that it has a lot to do with this relationship and the way that she is treating you. You've done a lot of work to figure this stuff out for yourself, and you're still having to deal with this person making these comments As much as you said it's gotten better, but I'm assuming that it's not completely gone. And that resentment is definitely like something that is tough to deal with, right? Like it's hard to not feel like, what the fuck, dude? Like looking back, this really fucked up my shit. You know what I mean? I think the unfortunate answer here is you kind of have to continue to be the grown-up in this situation, because you are in a position where you have done the work. You are better informed of the situation. You've done taken a lot of the adult steps that this person hasn't, even though they're older than you, even though they're the adult. You did acknowledge that like the reason that they have these habits in the first place is because of their own trauma. So they've obviously already they've gone through something that has caused them to do this. Which isn't an excuse, but it is an explanation. So an important thing for you to do is to remind yourself of that. It can be really difficult, but you have to remind yourself of that. And I think the best thing to do is when you're in those situations, if you're in a situation where they are making one of those comments in real time, that's not the best time to bring it up, because they're immediately going to get defensive, because it's a reaction. And I feel like people always get defensive when you bring something up like that, something that's a serious conversation, as part of a reaction. I would wait until you can have like there's a quiet moment when none of that stuff is going on, and say, not in an accusatory manner, because it's not what you say, it's how you say it. You have to be very like calm about it. You have to talk about you. You can't say like, you do this and it makes me feel like shit, because that's just like a very aggressive thing that's going to make them immediately feel like they're on the defensive. But after the fact, you can kind of look back maybe a few days later and say, hey, the other day we were talking about this, and I've just noticed recently that like I feel a certain way when, this comes up. Try to dance around it as much as you possibly can. I think being delicate is like really important. It sounds stupid, and a lot of people will be like, yeah, but I'm blunt. Like, listen, I'm a very blunt person, but it really is about the way that you like word certain things when it comes to people. And you have to come from a place of understanding. Since you understand that this person experienced some kind of trauma and that's the reason that they are this way, it's just gonna take them a while to see it, if they ever do. And you have to kind of like accept that they might never get to the point that you have. I do think those kinds of like conversations are important. So if you are able to get through to them at all and say, listen, I understand that this is your experience, like it might actually be helpful for you to bring up what they went through. If they have spoken to you about it, maybe get them to open up about that a little bit, and you can kind of point to that and say like, oh, that's really like, you kind of like piece things together. You have to piece the puzzle together very slowly, and you have to be patient about it. It just means that you have to do a lot of the work if you want this relationship to change, or to be like to evolve into like a more positive one. Like for instance, if this is an aunt and her mother, your grandmother, was like doing the same thing to her, you can kind of like bring that up in conversation and and ask questions and be sympathetic towards her situation to start, because that will only help this person, say it's your aunt, to start to recognize those own patterns without being accusatory towards her. By like, you don't want to just make the comparison. You don't want to say like, hey, grandma was a fucking bitch and you're a bitch just like grandma. Like, you don't want to do that, If you've tried this stuff, if you've tried to get through and you've done it in like a really respectful way, and you're being very adult about it, and you're basically trying to say like, listen, I want to work on the way that we communicate because I value our relationship and I want it to evolve to like a more healthy place for the both of us, and this person is like just completely not having it, then like boundaries need to be set, Because especially if you're an adult, if you're not like living in their house, you don't owe them anything. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, listen, this is unreasonable and it makes me feel a certain way. And if you're not going to respect that, then I'm going to limit my time around you. Which, that can suck. even that conversation, because it can be very like, not accusatory. It definitely shouldn't be accusatory, but it can be not defensive. What's that called? Confrontational, I guess. I would say that it's all in your tone though. The way that you like bring all of this stuff up is all in the tone. It has to be calm. It has to be understanding. You have to be very open-minded, and you need to put yourself in their position to be able to get through to them. Like that's what you have to do. Like you have to be able to, you have a lot of resentment. So like you might need to work through that resentment a little bit first before you can even bring this up with them. Because otherwise it's probably just going to be coming from a place of just so much frustration, and you might not be able to remove the emotion from it. So I do think that that's like a very important thing. Being able to like remove that initial emotional response that you have, basically like that trigger, you know? I hope that's helpful. It's obviously like I specifically told people not to share too many details, so as not to like out anyone who, you know, isn't interested in being spoken about on the internet. But I hope that that helped in like some way. I don't know. It's very difficult, but I think people are always kind of looking for advice, like the perfect advice, and this just isn't a perfect situation. Like it really isn't. Like navigating this kind of thing is going to be difficult no matter what. It doesn't really matter like which path you choose, because you're either setting boundaries which can be uncomfortable, or you're having very uncomfortable conversations to get to a better place. But you just have to be very open to the conversation, and you have to just like expect that parts of it are going to be uncomfortable. By the way, this is like probably one of my new favorite brow products, Jecca Black. It's like so freaking good. Like one of the only brow products that I've used where I'm like, damn, okay, I can fuck with this. Okay, here's the second one. I'm bi and polyamorous, and recently I had an earnest conversation with my sister wherein she basically expressed sorrow that I'm not likely to have one spouse in my life who I'll bring around constantly as she had envisioned. She just had a kid, and this came in the context of imagining her child having me as an aunt plus my lifelong partner as an aunt or uncle. I'm glad she felt like she could be honest with me and get shit off her chest, but also she's operating on some big assumptions, and I also, bitch, I don't do this for you. I was supportive at the time, but I keep thinking about it, and to be honest, it eats at me sometimes. We're close and I value her opinion, but this isn't really the kind of thing that she gets to have an opinion about. It's a core part of who I am. How do I tell her I'm not doing this for her without invalidating the loss that she feels? That's a good one. So I guess here's where you're wrong. You're wrong about one thing. She does get to have an opinion about it. We're all allowed to have opinions about things. What you're right about is, number one, how she expresses it, and you're very right about like, bitch, I don't do this for you. It's not like you have chosen this, right? It's like, this is your life. This is the path that you're going down, and it's not really up to her how you live your life, right? So like 100% correct on that. Obviously, I don't know the entire like, the assumptions thing was kind of funny because you're like, she's operating under a lot of assumptions. By that, I wasn't entirely sure how to interpret that. I assume just by context that you mean like she's assuming that you're not going to like pick one person, that you're just gonna kind of like be all over the place, and you're like, bitch, I could potentially pick like one or two like lifelong people or whatever. I obviously I see your frustration, because again, you don't do this for her. Like, it's not her fucking life, right? From her perspective, it seems like, number one, is she your older sister? Because if she's your older sister, then she just kind of feels like she can tell you what to do. Like that, would definitely do that kind of thing to my brother. I have a feeling that it's definitely not like a malicious thing, but you have to remember that like she's looking at it from her perspective, which isn't necessarily like, again, it's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. Looking at being able to put yourself in other people's shoes is so difficult. Like, it's actually really fucking hard. And it's something that you have to constantly remind yourself to do, you know? Once you even figure out that like that's an important thing to do throughout life. So she is clearly like, she's in a monogamous relationship. I'm assuming You said she just had a child. I'm assuming she's in a man-woman relationship, whatever you want to call that, like a tradition. She has like a traditional path essentially. So she probably as a kid and throughout her life has kind of like envisioned this like traditional thing. So your sister is living this like traditional life. You're not. So she's like, I can understand her perspective in like, oh, I wish that, you know, we were gonna have this like the typical thing, whatever the because like it seems like she, you know, is living the typical thing and you're not. So she's probably feeling a little sad about that it's not going to be exactly as she envisioned. And like you said, you're glad that she like felt like she could talk to you about this, because it's obviously something that like, I don't know if I would say weighing on her, but something that makes her feel like maybe it's going to affect your relationship negatively, which obviously it's not. Like, it's not at all. And you know that. And I think that's what your question, you said, how do I tell her I'm not doing this for her without invalidating the loss she feels? I think it's exactly that. It's in the sentence. You need to tell her that, like, or express to her in some way that, like, yeah, things aren't going to be like the traditional route or whatever, the way that it's been for years and blah, blah, blah. But that isn't necessary. That's not a negative thing. And you have to show her like all the different ways that it's going to bring like positivity to your relationship with your niece or nephew, to her family. If anything, it just brings like more diversity to the whole situation. Like, it's so much more interesting, and it's going to expose her kids to like so much more like variety and uniqueness that life has to offer versus like the traditional like same old, right? And obviously like your relationship with your niece or nephew and her like partner, whoever it is, isn't going to change at all because of that. So I think that you should just be honest with her about that and say like, listen, I totally understand that like from your perspective, this is what you kind of envisioned, but this isn't a bad thing. And also give her a little bit of a fucking check, because it's like, don't make assumptions about my life, bruh. You know what I mean? Yeah, family always thinks that they know what's best for us, you know? And so she's probably feeling just like, oh, I wish, or she wants like, I mean, I'm making a lot of some assumptions here, obviously, because I don't know either of you. But she's probably feeling a little bit like, oh, we're not going to have this shared experience. But you are. It's just going to be a little bit different. And I think that that's only going to make it better, because different perspectives of things only ever make things better. They just do. As long as the relationship is strong and you guys are open, you know, and like comfortable with each other, it only ever will make it better. I just want to make one really quick thing clear with basically all of these. Like, I don't think anybody really like owes an explanation to anyone about like the life that they are living. So I don't want you to feel like I am telling you like you have to do this. I think it's just about like, you know, you're obviously like, you lay out the certain situation that you're in. And if you're looking for advice and you're looking for like how to handle conversations in a healthy way and how to like maintain relationships in a healthy way, I think overall the best advice is never to like just say, well, fuck them. You know what I mean? Or like to just kind of write people off. I think most people are typically coming from a certain place. Like, for example, the first person who wrote in said, these comments are coming from somewhere. This person experienced trauma. And the second person explained like, listen, this is my sister's situation. And so this is her perspective. Essentially, that's like what she pictured for me. It's never typically even though like sometimes it can come out as aggressive or judgmental or, I mean, obviously it can do like a lot of damage to you as a person. It's never about you. Like, it really isn't. It has so much to do with like the other person and like how they're feeling about a certain thing. And I just don't think that like that you're going to be able to get through to those people if you come at them with like negativity and like being accusatory and those kinds of things. You have to be like open and understand from their perspective. And the frustrating thing about that is that you have to do the work if you want to make it work, you know? Like, it's frustrating that it's not more easy. It is frustrating. All right, guys, that is it for today's video. I appreciate everybody who wrote in You can continue to submit to that Google form. I'll link it down below. I'm just gonna use the same one probably for now, and I'll let you know when I'm like switching them up. But yeah, I'll continue to, and also like drop topics or whatever it is. I did get some like suggestions for topics. So I'm gonna continue this. It's gonna be a little series. They're gonna pop up every once in a while. It might not be like super regular, but yeah. It's enjoyable. I like talking to you guys about this stuff. All the comments that I always receive are like so amazing. It ends up being like really difficult to try and get back to everybody because I just get paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. And a lot of them I end up reading just like at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm like, can't sleep. But I really appreciate it. Like these are some of my favorite ones because I get to know a lot of you, like personally. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying them. Let me know, obviously, whatever topics and all the things, submit to the whatever, and I'll keep it going. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one.